All right, we're back. We are COMP308, Emerging Technologies at Centennial in the winter 2019 semester. And it's week one, part two of our broadcast. We're talking about JavaScript again. And we're also going to install Node.js and do a bunch of other stuff in this section. All right, let's take a look. So we left off, we were talking about our little anonymous self-executing function, an immediately invoked function expression, which is what this is. And we talked about different ways of declaring variables and variable scope. One thing I always like to add to JavaScript is use strict, right? And what use strict does is help us debug some of our challenges. A lot of times it's included nowadays in most modern versions of JavaScript anyway. But use strict, what it does, it stops or it triggers the compiler to say that certain things are going to give us some errors. All right, like for example, if I have undeclared variables, or by default, JavaScript will allow you just to assign a variable of a value without declaration. Like literally, I just take this away and it would still work, right? And that's really bad. That can cause all kinds of bugs to happen in the code. Use strict prevents that. Okay, so we put use strict in there for JavaScript. We have some basic things that we did before, and you know, I want to move into a place where I want to talk about adding additional libraries. So if you look at our plan, so the stuff we did on Slack earlier, we had, you know, kind of Visual Studio Code. We installed that, and then I want to use Bootstrap. And remember, we talked about this as, you know, Bootstrap. I'm not going to be doing any kind of CSS, advanced CSS in this course, but I want my pages to look good, especially on your assignments. I want them to look a little better. So we're going to use Bootstrap for that. So I have to go to Bootstrap. Let's take a look there. I'd have to go to Bootstrap and then click download, and then download the stuff, install it into my document or into my project in the right position, make sure it connects, and blah, blah, blah. So that's one task I'd have to do. What about if Bootstrap updates? Could I update Bootstrap easily this way? No, I'd have to go down there and up to Bootstrap, download it again, install it. That's kind of not optimal, right? So I probably don't want to do it this way. And then let's take a look. What else? In order for Bootstrap to work, well, you know what? I need jQuery. And for me to go to jQuery, if I go to jQuery for a second so I can show you this. Here's jQuery. I go to jQuery. I go over here. I download this. I install it. I put it in my documents, and then I try and install it properly. And if jQuery updates, I could do that again, right? Now, this is for, I have to also mention as an aside, this is for if I want to have, as a developer, all my files local. You can also use the Content Delivery Network, CDNs, that are also available up online in the cloud, where they update automatically for you. And that's great, but sometimes as developers, we want to be able to control and have access to the files locally. And then when we're ready, we put them up on, we kind of make them use the CDNs, okay? So what is a CDN? Content Delivery Network, for those people who forgot. When it comes to download jQuery, there's a couple of options here. One thing is I could do is I could download the uncompressed version right from here, yeah, and then download it, put it in my file, assign it to my project, and you know, arrange my project. So that's bad. It's bad because it's a lot of manual work if I'm going to do it that way, okay? And then if I go back to my Slack, I also want to use something called Font Awesome. I want to use these little icon fonts. They look kind of really cool in modern projects where I have, let's say, you know, some kind of icon font. These icon fonts are actually vector graphics that kind of scale with the application. So from a mobile perspective, when you change screen sizes and everything else, icon fonts look really nice. Again, for me to install this, I'd have to go here, download, install it in the proper location, and then if there's some kind of update, I have to update it later. A lot of work. And this is just these three little examples. If we want to update anything else in the future, it's the same, right? So we need some other kind of solution. And usually what we use is something called a package manager, right? Now, if you've taken COMP309, which is .NET, and the modern versions of .NET in this school now use .NET Core 2. If you've taken it before, .NET used to be web forms and MVC. And if you took it with me, that's what we did. They also use package manager. So Microsoft uses package management. And what packages are is, think about JavaScript as, jQuery as a package, or Bootstrap as a package, or Font Awesome as a package, or you make a package and you kind of publicize it on the web. You add to the community, and I download your package and I use that, right? As opposed to having to go there, download your package, install it manually, put it inside the thing, get it updated. It's too much work. And what about from a dependency perspective? How do I keep track of dependencies for my project? Manually? It's kind of weird, right? Especially when it comes to larger web applications. So we're talking about package management, and Node has that solution. So if I go Node, we're going to be talking about Node throughout the course anyway. And what I'd like you guys to do is download and install Node.js. Okay, now Node.js was originally done with the V8 engine, right? So at one point, and we're going to talk about Node next week, a little bit more detail, where there was this idea of using JavaScript on the front end as well as the back end. Right now, for the most part, 70% of all web applications are done with PHP, right? Kind of an unsecure, back end. That's what it is right now. And PHP, Apache as the server, and also MySQL as the database. So the AMP stack, Apache, MySQL, PHP. And that was a very common solution stack. And there's other ones. There's ones for Java and Java EE. There's ones for Python, on the front end and on the back end. Of course, we have our Microsoft solution stack with IIS, MS SQL, and some kind of .NET, the whole .NET package. That's another solution stack. And then they start thinking of, there's a lot of languages we have to learn. We have to learn, CSS and HTML and JavaScript and PHP and MySQL. We also have to know a little bit of Apache when it comes to modifying the server. There's a lot of stuff we have to understand how to do. Wouldn't it be grand if we only had to use one language? Which language would that be? JavaScript, right? And what if we could have JavaScript everywhere? JavaScript on the front end, JavaScript on the back end, JavaScript on the database, JavaScript on the configuration files. And that's what they did. And they started, we'll talk about this more in detail next week, but JavaScript is the thing that we use to, to format our most modern web apps. And Node.js is an event-driven server that allows you to do things just like, hey, if I hear a request from a user, then I'm going to respond with a web page, and a whole event-driven solution stack. Node.js is really cool in that it comes with a package manager called NPM, Node Package Manager, right? And that's what I want you to use when it comes to developing your web apps for the remainder of semester, okay? So we need to install one of these. LTS is the long-term, kind of solution, or a stable version, if you will, right? And it's kind of the one that's maintained, the long-term support version, if you will. We're going to use this one, 11.6.0. Okay, so please download and install the version for your operating system for Node.js, 11.6.0. When you download Node.js, what I'd like you to do is make sure you close down your Visual Studio Code, please, before you install. Because if you don't, when you install Node, it won't be installed properly on the path, and that would be very bad. So when you install Node, when you go to command prompt to check it, it should look like this. If I go Node -v, you should see 11.6.0. So please get there. For Mac users, if you're a Mac user, don't install Node this way. All right, this would be a bad way of installing Node. For Mac users, you want to install Node with Homebrew, right? So for those people who are watching who are Mac users. So Homebrew, install Node.js, right? And it doesn't matter which tutorial you use, but basically what you're going to use is this tutorial here. I'm going to actually put this link onto our Slack channel, so that way you can do that. So install Node for Mac with Homebrew. So you can see that I'm using our little Slack app for this kind of thing. So there's some links to help you do that with the stuff that we're going to be doing throughout the semester. And the reason for this is because if you don't use Homebrew for Mac, then you have to do a sudo or sudo command every single time. So every single time you have to get permission to do a package installation. which is a real pain. We don't want that. All right, so if you've done installing Node, and if you can go to your command prompt and you see that your version of Node is 11.6.0, you're good. Okay, that's what it should be. And you're going to get some version of npm. You should be able to do this too, npm and then -v, and get some version of npm at 6.something.0. My version is 6.1.0, but we can easily update that. So again, the Node package manager is the thing that we're going to use to install stuff. So here's the way Node package manager works. The npm works like this: npm install, right? So we kind of do it like this. Hey, npm, I want to do something. What? Install. I want to install something. What do you want to install? Well, I want to install a package. Okay, where do you want it? Locally or globally? Well, I want it globally, -g, right? I want to install a package globally. What package is it? What's the name of the package? NodeMon would be the name of the package. I'm just picking one that I recommend you download anyway. And if I press enter, the Node package manager goes out to the web, grabs that package, and installs it globally so that all your projects use it. npm, Node package manager. And NodeMon, which is a monitor for Node applications, which we're going to be using later. Okay, that's an example of how to use the Node package manager for global package installations. But we don't want to use just global package installations. We want to use local package installations for your projects. One more I recommend, and I didn't do this in the morning section, but I'll do it with you guys. I'm going to do an npm install -g for global light-server. And what light server does is it actually allows you to do small little web apps and give a browser update or sync. It does browser sync. It syncs up your web app with Visual Studio Code. So when your web app is updated on Visual Studio Code, it automatically updates your browser without you having to refresh. Okay? So that's light-server. So again, the commands are npm. Hey, npm is what you should think in your mind. Hey, npm, install something globally. What is it? Light server. Okay? Let's close this down. Let's go back into Visual Studio Code to check this out. So here I am in Visual Studio Code. I've got my project opened up. I'm going to use the terminal in my project, and then the shortcut key for the terminal, again, is Control backtick, right? Again, backtick is just underneath the escape key on your keyboard. Control backtick. All right, so here I am, and I want to start installing packages. I want to install Bootstrap. I want to start developing my web application, all right? By the way, this way of developing our web application is just for today. Next week, we're going to start Node and Express, and we're not going to use index.html as our main manifest for the entire application. We're going to be using something else. So, but for today, what I want to do is I want to do an npm init. What npm init does is it goes up to the web and it says, hey, I'm going to install, I'm going to initialize my npm or my Node package management here in my application. When I press enter, it gives me this little wizard or batch file. And it says, hey, we need you to fill out some information for us, okay? By the way, are you cool with a package name COMP308-W2019-1B and all in lowercase? If you are, press enter. Great. In my mind, this is what my little voice, it's the voice in my head that I'm talking about right now, right? Hey, version 1.010, is that right? Yes, enter. Okay, description. COMP308 demo project, right? Good. Entry point. Let's leave it the same. Test command. We don't have any. Git repository. Not yet. Right? Keywords. Forget it. Author. That's me. Let's put that name in. Tom. And yeah, you write your name. And then license. Okay. No problem. And then it's going to say, are you sure? Is this what are you good with this thing? This is a little batch file that's running. Are you okay with this? Yes, I am. In fact, if you really want to, just press enter, 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 enter. And don't even put anything in, right? That would work too. Okay. So what does this do? What this does is it actually creates a little thing called package.json. So another file that's generated from this script. When I actually typed in npm init, it wrote this batch script that allowed me to enter all this stuff and create my package.json file. The package.json file what it is allows us to track dependencies. So remember I talked about this. I want to run Bootstrap, but for Bootstrap I need jQuery. So jQuery, Bootstrap is dependent on jQuery for it to run, right? So jQuery then is a dependency, right? And I want to use Bootstrap in my code, right, in my project. So then Bootstrap becomes a dependency, right? And if I want to use Font Awesome or something else, that becomes a dependency. There's two types of dependencies that we're going to be talking about. One is a development dependency, which is I really don't need it for the project. I just need it to make me happy as a developer. That's a developer dependency. And the other type is a project dependency, which is what we're making right now. All right, so how do I install project dependencies? Now here inside Visual Studio Code, I can clear the screen with either a CLS, or the clear command. Those both work now for me, okay? Either way, my screen is clear. Next, I want to install something with NPM. How do I do it? npm install some kind of prop package, okay? Now, if it's not global, I don't have to use the -G. If it's just local to my project, I want to install jQuery, okay? I got to spell it properly too. jQuery, okay, but I want to save this as a project dependency. -save. That's what it looks like. So hey, npm install jQuery and save it as a project dependency. Enter. It goes out to the web, grabs jQuery, installs it. Boop. But it installs it in a special folder called Node modules. All right? And we'll talk about this later on. All right, I'm going to clear the screen. And I'm going to do it again. npm install. And I need to install Bootstrap, right? So here's Bootstrap, right? And -save. Hey, let's, npm, go grab Bootstrap for me and install it. And it says, well, we have a problem. Bootstrap kind of needs this thing called popper.js. You don't have that in your application. Okay, that means I need to install that dependency. So let's just do that. So npm, type npm install popper.js -save. And it goes out to the web, grabs popper.js, slams it into our code. Great. Notice it also gives us another warning. It says, hey, you know what? Your little project doesn't have a repository field. Well, of course not, because we don't have a repository right now. Well, we're going to get there. Okay, next, I want to install Font Awesome. I'm going to go npm install font-awesome, right, -save. And it got Font Awesome and put it into our application. But what's happened is it's actually plopped it into this folder, Node modules. So Node modules has Bootstrap, Font Awesome, jQuery, and popper.js right now. That's what you should have when you do that. Question: would we want to put Node modules in our repository up online? Typically not. Sometimes yes, depending on what you're doing with it. If you're making a game, chances are yes, right? If you're not making a game and you're using you're making a web application, the answer is no, because this stuff has already been put up on the web. Actually, if anything, when you use npm, it goes out to GitHub, grabs the stuff from GitHub, and puts it into your application. Now you're just putting it back. So we don't need to put that because it exists. And anytime I want to install my dependencies, all I have to do is type in the keyword npm install. And what this does is it looks at your package.json file and says, if there's something that's in my dependency list, these ones, see how it added that in, right? Every time I put npm something, it created a dependencies field, and then it added each of the dependencies that I installed, right? And their versioning, okay? So it looks there and it says, if I do an npm install, it looks in here and sees that if there are any dependencies that are not fulfilled that are inside my node modules folder. If they're not there, it'll go out, grab them all, and install them for me. So the right thing to do is when we put stuff up on GitHub, we don't include node modules folder. And when we download something, then we just go npm install, and then it installs everything for us before we run our application. Okay? So in order for us not to put it up on GitHub, before we establish a Git repo locally, we want to use something called a git ignore file. And you may have or may not use this with your GitHub stuff. All right. So again, I'm going to kind of click out here, and I'm going to click this little file button right here. And there's other ways of doing that too. And I'm going to type in .git ignore. And what this file does is a special file that's only seen by GitHub and Git, local Git. And what it's going to do is anything I put inside my git ignore, anything I list inside my git ignore file will be ignored. It will not be tracked. So it's like a do not track, node_modules. So now the node modules folder will not be tracked by Git in GitHub. Okay, cool. I think we're ready to put this up on GitHub, right? We've kind of done a little bit of work, and we've played around. We've created our package, and I want to put this up on GitHub now. So remember how GitHub works, and I'm going to use a little tool for drawing, a little drawing tablet that I have for this. So imagine what GitHub is all about. We have, kind of our little computer. Here's the, kind of the tower. My bad drawing. Brian, don't get mad. And then we have, kind of some kind of screen, maybe a keyboard, for our computer, whatever. And then, you have some files. So the files live in some kind of folder, right? And you have some kind of files, right? Yeah. And what you want to do with Git and GitHub, there's 3 reasons why you use Git and GitHub. What are they? Backup, collaboration, you communicate with other people, right? And the third one is version control. So ever run into a situation where, hey, it just worked and now it's not working and I don't know how and what happened, you can always step back. It keeps track of each version of your code through GitHub. And in order for us to do that, we need to create a baseline version, right? So something of a base. And if you've never used GitHub before, is there anyone who's never used Git or GitHub or version control? Okay, so this is all new for you. So then the way it works is, so I have these files. These are all files inside of a folder. Let's suppose this is my project folder, right? When I initialize my Git repository, I need to use a special command, git, right? So this is the command, and then init. And what this does is it says, hey, in this folder, I want to create a hidden .git folder. So this .git folder lives inside of this folder itself. It's a hidden folder. All right, when I use my git init command. Let's try this out. So I'm going to go into Visual Studio Code, and here I'm in command prompt. I'm just going to clear this, and I'm going to do git init, and then it's going to say, hey, Git has been initialized. And notice this all lights up green, and it goes, hey, there's 6 files that I have to put up on GitHub. It's immediate, right? What has happened in my operating system, though? If I look at the operating system files, let's just go right to the desktop. And if I look at the operating system files, I see that there is a hidden .git folder. Now, I can see the hidden files and folders because I've configured my Windows system to do that. In order for you to see the files and folders, which I recommend that you do, then you go here and you type in Control Panel. And in Control Panel, you're going to see a File Explorer Options option. And inside there, you're going to see some tabs. One of them, you want to go to the View tab. In the View tab, you're going to see what I've done is I display the full path in the title bar. I also show hidden files, folders, and drives. I do that for sure. I don't hide empty drives. I don't hide extensions for known file types. I don't hide folder merge conflicts. I don't hide protected operating system files, which they recommend for a non-developer to hide. I don't hide any of those things, right? And when I do that, it exposes all these hidden files. So .git, the hidden .git file gets exposed. This is actually a folder. If I actually double click in there, there's a folder of stuff that's in here, right? And this is how Git in GitHub works. It uses a hidden folder to keep track of your versioning. In fact, it keeps copies of your files inside there too. So it can get rather large. So now that we have that .git folder, that's the first part. It keeps track of our, our Git, our baseline. That's what that does. And what we want to do now is we want to say, hey, out of this subset of files, we want to select or kind of which one of these files we're going to put up on, put into the repository. Which one do we want to track? So anything that's not in the git.gitignore file will get tracked if we use the following command. So if I say git, right, and if I say add, that's the verb. Hey, this looks very familiar to npm. npm, hey npm, do something. Hey git, do something. It's a verb. Git add what? What do I want to add? I want to add everything. Git add dot is the command. Git add dot adds everything to the staging area. When I do this, it does this. It says, okay, I want this one. Oh, I want this file. I want this file. Hey, you know what? I want this whole folder too, right? And it basically puts us on something called the staging area. So there's another, almost like a temporary space, if you will, right? Where it puts these same files in the staging area. This is the staging area, right? And what staging does is says, okay, I'm ready to make a commit. I'm ready to make a snapshot. I haven't done a snapshot yet. I'm just preparing to do it. That's what the staging area is, okay? And that's what git add dot does. Let's do that. So I'm going to go back into my Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to say git add dot. And now you see that all those files have been added to my staging area, right? Number 2. 3. I'm just going to clear this up. 3. After we've got our staging area, and it does that, what I want to do is I want to create a snapshot. I want to also, it's almost like I want to, use this as my target baseline. So whatever this was, the state of these files, it's almost like going to become a target for me. This is going to be the thing that I'm going to use, that I'm going to look at every single time I make new versions of my code, right? And the way to start that process off is to make a commit. So I'm going to say git commit minus M for message. This is actually a space. I'm going to do that. Change. Minus M for message with a space. And then the friendly name of your commit message. Okay, and for me, it's in the beginning, the first commit. There's two conventions we use. One is initial commit. Another one is first commit. Either one is okay. I like to use initial commit. Okay. So this initial commit is what we want to do. And what it does is it puts a friendly name to the snapshot. GitHub also does, or Git also does a couple things. It also gives you a code, a hash, a special number. It numbers each of the commits in a special way. So here, if we did it, if I said git commit minus M for message, and then I make my commit message initial commit, and I press enter, it basically takes all these files. It looks at the gitignore file. It's going to actually put that up too, right? Gitignore, my app.css, my app.js, my index.html, my package-lock.json, my package.json. It takes all those files and it's created a commit. Notice over here, there's nothing to commit anymore, right? So this little icon here tracks which ones are ready to commit. Okay, so what we've done is we've created a commit, and there's some other commands, additional commands we can use to find out what's happened. So if I clear the screen, not here. If I clear the screen, and if I want to find out, where we are with Git, I can just use a git status command. But git status says then, is there anything left to commit? Is there any uncommitted files? Are there any untracked files in your folder? That's what git status does. Okay, and then I can also do git log. And what git log does is shows me my commit. Here it is. Hey, this is a beautiful commit number. Look. It's like really large, right? And the reason why it does is it generates this number based on the date, the computer, the type of commit, a bunch of other factors, and it creates a unique number globally. I'm talking about worldwide, right? So this number will be not different. It'll be totally different, chances are, with any of your numbers, okay? For this particular repository. All right, cool. So this is really cool. So, and it tells me the commit message down here, initial commit. If I had more, it would show all the commits, as many as it could fit on a page. All right, it also says this, head is the master on the master branch. And we'll talk about branching another day, right? But what I want you to think about is this. In my repository, in the files that I've taken a snapshot, I've got a first commit called initial commit, and it's got a number. Okay, so that's great. I've done this great work and whatever. But, my dog comes along and, he wrecks my server some way. Maybe he pees on it. I don't know. He does a bunch of bad things to my computer, kills that thing too. And then I got no computer and my files are gone, right? Even though I've done a local, snapshot or whatever, it's gone now, right? So this was something that happened. Like buildings would burn, computers would fail, magnets, would come around, whatever, and you'd lose files. And this would be a bad thing. So we thought about, kind of saving your files offline. Some people would do it manually initially. Then we thought of a kind of a cloud solution. There's a couple of them. The most popular one that I can think of, I'm just drawing a poor cloud over here, is called GitHub, right? Which is kind of a platform as a service or software as a service. And GitHub is not connected in any way to your computer initially. What you need to do is you need to create a repository on GitHub first. So here's your repo, right? And your repository is just going to be a container that's empty initially. It's going to be a container of information. Now, this is way different than what we've done with Dropbox, let's say. Dropbox, you have kind of connect out. You can do stuff with Dropbox. You can go in there and remove files and add files. And same thing with Google Drive. You can go to Google Drive and add files and delete OneDrive, Google, and a bunch of other ones. It's not like those at all. You do not have direct file access. What you do have is the ability for you to push your local repo. So this is kind of like a cloud repo, right? So this is on the cloud. And this is kind of your local repo, right? So your local repo is locked into your machine, right? And what you can do is you can connect these two by creating something called a remote. So there's a remote that connects these two together, right? So that's what this is called. And when I use this remote, I have the ability for me to upload or push this direction, right? Or I can download or pull in this direction. So when I do a pull, these are actual commands, by the way. Push, pull. It's really exciting, right? And then what happens is when I push, if I create my remote, first I create my repo, it's empty. Then I create a remote, and then I push to it, to the repo. And what happens is the files of the snapshot that are here come up here, and they basically list down here. And the same commit number is tracked up on GitHub, whatever that commit number is, okay? And for every commit I make, let's say, for example, I make another commit and another snapshot and another snapshot, it'll track all the snapshots similar to what I'm doing here. So if I make another snapshot here, for every snapshot I do here, I can push or pull or whatever I want to do, and I can put it up on the cloud. Now, I'm just giving you the high level of how it works. So what we have to do now is we have to create our repository online. Let's do that. So I'm going to go to GitHub. Remember, we need just to create a container for my files, right? And our GitHub link, as we talked about before, is on github.com, and it's /Centennial College. Yes, I own this particular one. Luckily, I was able to pick Centennial College as the organization. But it's not me, obviously. But this is me. This is like me managing it right now. And notice that I have a repo from earlier. I want to make a new one. There's two options to make a new one. I could use the plus, or I can use new. Let's use new in this case. So I'm going to use a new one, and it's on my Centennial College account. And I'm going to call this one COMP308-W2019-lesson 1B. And then this is unique to my repository for Centennial College, right? There's other options here. Public, private repos cost money typically. Again, you can change this. Initialize this repository with a README. Don't do that for now. Let's leave that off. Add a gitignore file. Well, no, I have a gitignore file, so I don't need to add one. But you could have done it before. In fact, there's a whole workflow where you do the repository first, sync up with that, and then create your project, right? Different kind of workflow. And that's not the workflow we're using here. You can also add a license file if you want, different kinds of licenses to share your work. For now, we're just going to keep all these, the default values, and click Create Repository. So when you do that, it creates an empty container. There's nothing in here right now. However, it does give us some information. Look, here's some of the commands we've used in slightly different format. Git init, we need to do that. Git add, instead of dot, they wanted to add the README file. We're not going to do that. Git commit -m. They use first commit, not initial commit. Same thing. And then these last 2 lines of code are the things we want. We could simply copy and paste these lines of code into my command prompt there. So copy, go back into my command prompt in Visual Studio Code, and paste by right-clicking. If I right-click and then press Enter, if you're doing this for the first time, what it's going to say is, can you please log in? It'll ask you to log into your GitHub repository. It'll come up with a little dialog box that says, name and everything else. You type in your name and your password in this repository. I don't have it here because it's not the first time I've logged in. And then once it's done, if you've put in your credentials correctly, it's going to store those credentials with Credential Manager in Windows, so you never have to do this again. And that's why I got you to go do that whole git-scm.com thing for you to do that. If you haven't done that, you can always go back and fix this problem, but it will ask you to log in for the first time. Once you've done that and it does everything, it pushes everything into the master branch. Let's review the command a little bit. It says git remote add. So here's my remote. Hey Git, add a path, a connection to the remote cloud repository. That's what this is. Hey, what's it called, that connection? It's called origin. That means that this remote has a name. We can name this thing whatever we want. The convention is to call this thing origin. We also name this the origin remote. You can have more than one remote repository. For example, let's say you use GitLab, you use GitHub, and you use Bitbucket. Those are different services, right? They all are Git-based services, right? I can have a remote for GitLab, for GitHub, or for Bitbucket. And maybe I have different services that are connected to those other services that update whenever I update GitHub or GitLab or whatever. All right, so that's the origin remote. So I can call this, I don't know, remote GitLab, remote Bitbucket, remote GitHub if you want. You can call it whatever you like. But the convention is origin. Okay, that's what this does. And then here is the path for the origin remote. So HTTPS, so secure connection with github.com / the account name, Centennial College, and then the repository, COMP308-W2019-lesson1b.git. That is the link that I was talking about earlier that you're going to have to submit later on to me for your exercise today. Okay? Now, this is my link. You'd make your own, but this is the way that it would work. Okay, so that's the first command. The second command is a push command, git push -u for unconditional. So I want to push and don't stop me, please. That's what it means. And then where? To my origin remote into the master branch. That's what happens. Okay, so that's the second directive. So there's a couple more directives we have to make. So now we're done. If we go back up to our page, and if I refresh, you can see now that I have all my files up online. Yes?
Why is there no asset folder?
That's a good question. Why do you think there's no asset folder? There's nothing in it. So what it doesn't look, remember, we don't have direct file access in GitHub. There's no access folder because it's not required. If I had something, anything, even if it was a text file in my asset folder, it would become created for me, right? And tracked, because right now there's nothing to track. What am I going to track? An empty repository, an empty folder? No, right? And on that means if I have an empty project and I have nothing to track, you can't put it up on GitHub. There's nothing to put if it's empty, right? All right, so these are the files we have. So now you can look online, and for you this semester, please use my GitHub repo in Centennial for any of the ones we've talked about. If you need it for a test, if you need it for your own work, for reference, if you need it to keep up, maybe I'm going too quick, right? You said I'm going too fast. Say, Tom, hey, push to GitHub, right? And then I'll push to GitHub, and then you're up to date. So you can look at what I just did, and you don't have to struggle to keep up. All right, that's what it's for. Or maybe you're looking at the videos from home, and you want to refer back to the archive to compare what you got through by going through the videos again and what I had put up and see the difference. There's many reasons why you want to do this. But this repository is what we're sharing for the entire semester. All right, so that is how we use GitHub, to put everything up online. And this is part of what you're going to be doing later on today, okay? Great. We've done GitHub, and I've downloaded, I'm going back to this, I've downloaded my, my code. I've used my package manager to download these packages inside of my project. I need to use them now, right? So how do I use this stuff? Well, I know that a little bit about how this works. And notice my git ignore file needs saving. I'm just going to just close all this off. I'm going to go back into my index.html, and you can see that I have this way of doing things. I want to add some more content here, and I want Bootstrap to help me out a little bit. So one thing I know, and this is information for you, is Bootstrap has both CSS and JavaScript files, and it has a jQuery dependency. So let's put the first part in. The first part is I want to say I need to make a link, which is like adding a CSS link. I'm going to press tab. What tab does is it types in the element for me, part of it anyway. /node modules. So I'm looking in there now. Bootstrap. In the dist folder, dist is the distribution folder. All right, we're going to make our own later on in the semester. Dist folder. In the dist folder, I want to look at the CSS folder. In the CSS folder, I want to look at the bootstrap.min.css file. And that's what the full path looks like this. So it says, hey, look in node modules, look in Bootstrap, look in distribution folder, look in the CSS folder, and get this file, bootstrap.min.css. What's min stand for? Minified. Minified, which means, and by the way, if you ever want to look at files, if I press Control, see how it highlights, it looks at this connected file like a link. Control, click, actually shows me the file. Take a look at this. This is a minified version of a CSS file. Okay. So that's what Bootstrap does. And I also want font awesome. So let's do that. So link, and then I'll say /node modules /font awesome. And then it's inside the CSS file in this case, and fontawesome.min.css. Now this, I have to tell you, is a reduced set of font awesome icons that we can use. It's not the full set, okay? And then that part is done. So I've done the CSS, but you need JavaScript as well for Bootstrap to work. So we need jQuery first. So I'm going to say script down here. I'm going to go script source, and inside there I'm going to go /scripts. Oh, sorry, node modules, and then it's going to be Bootstrap. Oh, sorry, let's do jQuery first. jQuery, I'll be okay. And then dist, and then jQuery.min.js. That's your jQuery dependency. And then, just like I did before, I'll go to Bootstrap by going /node modules, and then Bootstrap, and then I need to go to dist, and then JS, and then bootstrap.min.js, the minified version of the Bootstrap JavaScript library. And that, my friends, is what you require. Those are dependencies to run Bootstrap and Font Awesome. Now, why am I showing you this stuff? Because later on, when you do your assignment number 1, assignment number 2, assignment number 3, I'm going to ask you to make it look nice. Professor Ilya likes to call it friendliness, right? I don't like that word. But for me, it's, can you make it look appealing? If you can make it look appealing, you can do so with a library that's pre-written for you. I don't expect you to be CSS professionals or whatever, but I do expect you as developers to be able to use somebody else's CSS library. Okay, and that's what this is. All right, so once I've got this now, that's great, but it's not going to do anything for me. Let's take a look at the Bootstrap website for some documentation to get going. I'm going to go on to Bootstrap, and I got a bunch of these things. I'm just going to close some of this down for now so that it gives us a little bit more room and doesn't drive me crazy. I'm going to come back to that one. Actually, I'll just close them all down, and I'll come back to that in a second. So yeah, so what I want to do is I want to go to Bootstrap. And Bootstrap, when you go there, has a documentation link. So if I go to Bootstrap, I have documentation. And on the left, you can see that it has something called components on the left-hand side after I press documentation. Right, and if I look on the left again, the components open up, and I have something called a nav bar. So I want to have this nav bar appear in my page, and it's going to look something like this. This is the nav bar. All right, I don't want to code this. I don't even want to style this. I want just a nav bar on my page, right? It's a common navigation scheme. So what do? Copy. I go back to my page, in the top of my page. I give a bit of a space, paste, and I save it. Cool. Okay, let's use an npm module to do some syncing. So if I go here, I want to run my page in my browser. I can use what we entered before. Remember, we had npm install light-server and global space. I just type in light-server in here and press enter, and then clickety-clack, I have my navbar. Okay, but it's a generic navbar, and I want to make it my own. And what does the navbar do? Can I test it to see that Bootstrap is working? Absolutely. And the way to do that is I can go here, and if as I change, viewport sizes, like let's say, for example, I'm using an iPhone XR or the latest version of my Google Pixel, and I want to look at my website, I have this little hamburger like normal. This is a convention now. I click onto it and I see my links. Yeah, this is all happening automatically for me because I'm using the Bootstrap framework, right? So notice that it does responsive design, which is pretty cool. Okay, that's great. But this is pretty ugly. And what does this look like? What does this look like? So if I look at my navbar, what I've added in is I've got this navbar, and it uses a bunch of classes. These classes are what I'm borrowing from Bootstrap. The people at Bootstrap have written all these beautiful CSS classes that are very common, although they do look a little bootstrappy, right? But they do, right? You can look at a Bootstrap site and that's Bootstrap, right? Just like you look at Unity and you're like, a Unity game, that's Unity, right? It's the same thing. You can identify, where the framework came from. But what we want to do is we want to make this, instead of a light bar, we want to make it dark. And notice it says navbar light. This is a CSS class. If we use our intuition, we can probably say, well, what about if we said navbar dark? That would probably work. And in the background, make that dark too, right? So if we change the lights to dark, right? And if we went back, you can see now that I have a navbar that's dark. Notice that I didn't refresh the page because I'm using light-server. Light server is actually a little tiny server that's actually connecting with my project and automatically updating my browser when I update my project, right? So notice that I have a dark themed navbar. That's pretty generic. Okay, let's make it my own. Going back. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at this. I have a nav element, and I have a button that is going to be my little hamburger that's going to come up when I toggle. That's those little lines that come up, right? And I have my navbar, which is part of my brand. Let's change my navbar to say COMP308. So my navbar is the top left corner of my navbar, right? It's this part right here, COMP308. Notice the workflow. I'm not going through, I'm refreshing, going back, none of that, right? Light server. And now I have this other stuff. I have an active link. Active links are whiter than the rest. These are kind of grayed out. An active link looks like I'm there, like almost like breadcrumbs. I know where I am, right? And this is done by using nav item and the active class. If I was to move the active class from here to this one, right? And if I was to go back, now you can see that this one is active, right? So you can move that around. Right, cool. So active, non-active, right? But this is kind of weird. This is my home, and this is kind of a link, a generic link. Let's add the 5 pages. And by the way, hint, hint, this is going to be one of the assignments you're going to have to do for yourself. The 5 pages are the most common things that we set up any website for any user, any company. They ask for 5 pages typically to start off, which is home, about, right? Products. Just copy pasting here, right? Products. If I can talk at all. Services. And maybe a contact link. How about that one, right? Here's my contact. Okay, so I've kind of replicated this link a bunch of times, and if I go back, you can see now that I have home, about, product, services, contact, some kind of dropdown that's useless, a disabled link I want to get rid of, and some kind of search bar that I have no functionality for, right? So I want to get rid of this, this, and this. Okay, cool. So that is further down. So here's my dropdown. I don't need this. So this whole list item up to here, where it says new item dropdown, I want to get rid of. Boop. And this disabled link, this list item here, I want to get rid of that too. And this form that has my search bar, let's get rid of that too. And now if I go back, it looks like I'm better. But you know what? I don't want these links over here. I want these links to appear over here. How do I do that? Well, let's do some spacing. Make this a little nicer. A little bit of formatting. I hate little spaces for no reason. If I look up here, I can see that, okay, so this is my dark theme. Oh, hey, look. Navbar, nav, MR, auto. Margin right, auto. Let's make this margin left auto. And if I press save, ML auto, one little character change. Whoop. Oh, there we are. It's on the right side now. Bootstrap. It's a powerful tool. Lots of really cool stuff. And makes your pages look awesome for no work. Notice now that if I go like this, I have responsive design. I have my links here nicely. It looks nice. And I can move on with a nice little nav bar. All through the magic of Bootstrap. By the way, guys, doesn't matter if you do it through here, which is a standard, this is a conventional website kind of thing, or the new websites we're going to do with Node.js and the whole Angular.js stuff. Angular uses Bootstrap, so does .NET Core. A lot of other kind of companies and frameworks use Bootstrap or borrow the stuff from Bootstrap, and because it's a solid framework. There's also other ones. For example, there's Material Design that a lot of the Android applications are using these days, which is another type of framework you can use similar to Bootstrap. And there's also a bunch of other ones that I'm not going to mention right now. Okay. Anyway, so home, about, products and services and contact. But wouldn't it be nice if we had little cool icons? Font, awesome. Font icons that I could use, like a little house, maybe a little, I don't know, some other gears or whatever to make this, spice this up even more. So it's not looking really boring the way it is right now. It's just like link text. Yes. And the way we do this is by going back to our font awesome. Let's just bring up font awesome for a second. So here's font awesome. And if we look at the icons link by clicking the icons here, you can see that there's a bunch of, now warning, some of these icons are pro versions, which you have to pay for. And some of these icons are just not available in font awesome. You have to try some of these out. Again, there is a more complicated, longer way of getting most of these icons other than the pro version icons. The pro version icons, first of all, are grayed out, so just don't go with them. But some of these darker icons are not available either, right? So the way I want a home. That one I know is there. So if I search for home, you can see that there's a little house. Yay, look. And it gives you the code right here. So if I take this code, click onto it up here, and you can see that it's vector graphics. So vector graphics are awesome because what they do is they scale to fit different viewport sizes. So if I go here and I've got the little code and I want to put my home icon here, I'm just going to kind of Control-V paste, and it's an I tag with a class of, and this is wrong, FA home, FA home. And if I did this, if I saved it and I went back to my page, right, and if I go back out to my web page, which is here it is, right? And if I look at my my web page, which is here, you can see now that I have a little home. Okay, it's really tiny though, and I want to make it bigger. So let's add a modifier, FA-large, right? Okay, so save that, go back out, and it's a bit bigger. If I want to make it really big, FA-2x, 2x, right? And go back, and it's really huge, right? And that's probably too big because now it offsets some of this, right? Let's leave it like this and make the rest of them like that. How about that? So great thing to do is just copy paste. So copy paste all this, and we're just fulfilling our stuff here where we have a bunch of houses, but we're going to change them to something else. But we have the basic code down, right? So they're all 2x. Instead of FA home, let's use info for about. I know this one because I've done it before. FA info. And, for contact, let's use FA phone, right? And, you know, there's a couple of other ones for products. Maybe we'll use a briefcase, right? There's briefcase. Oop, undo that. Briefcase. I'll be okay. And for services, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of ones we can use for services. We can also use the gear icon, maybe. There is a gear. Or maybe it's something else. So notice I'm getting some pop-ups here that you may not be getting because I've installed the Font Awesome pack. You may or may not be getting these pop-ups. So again, maybe if I say clock, there might be a clock. I'm not sure the clock is the right one to use, but let's use clock for now and see what I get. So I get this. You can see that services didn't quite work. Clock is wrong. Let's go to Font Awesome and find a nice services icon that we can use. So if I type in service and press enter, you might see something that's really cool. I'm guaranteeing you won't see this concierge bell. Maybe there's just a bell that we can use. Bell. Yeah, this bell probably would work, right? So I don't know why we would use a bell for services, or maybe something like a bullseye. Maybe that would work for services. I don't know. I'm just making this up, but you can use something that makes sense for you is what I'm saying. So J dash, maybe bullseye. Yeah, bullseye looks like it's going to work. All right, undo that. Sorry, I meant just to put in bullseye. And if we go back and everything is good, we should have a bullseye for services. Okay. Quick icons. Not sure if I like them, but at least they're interesting. Okay. And then if I was to change the size, the viewport size of this thing, so it goes back into a hamburger. So I'm using it as a phone or an iPad or something. And I click onto this, you can see that the icons are preserved. Okay. And you can use, this is a demonstration of both Font Awesome and Bootstrap being used at the same time. All right, cool, but I got no content. And I want something that says, hey, you know, welcome or hello world or something to make it interesting. And maybe a footer too. How about that? So we can do that again with Bootstrap. So if I go back up to Bootstrap, you can see that Bootstrap doesn't just have components in the form of nav bars, but it also has something called a Jumbotron that looks like this. Here's my Jumbotron. And you know what? I might as well copy the Jumbotron and put it into place. So the Jumbotron should go underneath my nav bar. Hey, you know what? Let's do a little bit of comments. This is our main nav. Let's mention that main nav bar, right? A little bit of comments to tell me what I'm doing here in my HTML. Again, this is just a review. And then what I want to do is I want to kind of say, well, this is my Jumbotron. This is like kind of main content area, main contents, right? That's what I want to do here. I'm going to put the Jumbotron in for now and see what it looks like. Leaving it as is. And let's go back out to the web page and go to here. And you can see that I got a Jumbotron, but it fills up the entire page. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want the Jumbotron just to be in the middle. How do I do that? Well, I can make it in, I can put this in a container. Bootstrap has different kinds of containers you can use. You can use the regular container, which gives you a bit of margin on both sides. A container fluid that gives you a lot less margin, or no container, right? I can also, from a semantic perspective, nav is okay, but maybe what I want to do is, in my main nav, I want to put it in some kind of header. So I want to put like, I use a header, you know, kind of element, and put all this in my header, just to encapsulate that. So kind of put that in there. And maybe what I want to do in my main content, I also want to put this in a main, something that's like a main. And main is actually semantically correct, right? So screen readers, that kind of stuff will pick those up. So I'm going to put that inside main, and I'll format that later. And in main, what I want to do is I want to use a CSS class from Bootstrap called container. And I don't know if that works, but let's see what happens. Right? And again, if you want to format, you can do Control-A to highlight everything, right-click in Visual Studio Code. And when I want to, I can format the document. And this formats everything so it looks nice, kind of. All right, cool. So I'll save this. I'll go back out to the web and boom, right? I'm good. It's got my margin that I wanted for my container. Remember I said there's a bit of margin on both sides for containers, right? If I wanted a container fluid has less margin, right? then I just change this class to container fluid, container dash fluid, right? And container dash fluid, what it does, it looks like this. So it's kind of like, to the side. Again, one thing to note that all Bootstrap stuff, it's responsive, so it responds to the size of my viewport, and it still has the same functionality, which makes it, kind of a bit more future-proof than you doing it by yourself without any kind of responsive design in your mind, right? So again, when I ask you for stuff, my expectation is this is the minimum amount. I'm looking for something that's responsive, that uses a framework that looks fairly nice. Nothing ugly, please. You'll be marked on some kind of appeal. There'll be an appeal mark on your stuff, right? I don't need you to be designers or artists. I need you to use tools that are out there as developers. Okay. So I've got my hello world. I've got this thing, and maybe I want to add a footer. And I'm going a little bit beyond what I did earlier today. So again, I want to add a footer. And in my footer, I want another nav bar, but I want it to be sticky. I want to make a sticky footer so that it always appears at the bottom of my screen, like way at the bottom, right? Again, I could use CSS for this manually, but why bother? So I want to go back out to Bootstrap, and I want to look at navs or nav bars. So if I look at navs, it talks about a base nav, how to create it. And that's why I love Bootstrap, because it has a bunch of documentation on how to do stuff for yourself. Like if you're thinking about something to do, Bootstrap can help you do it. And it talks about horizontal alignment. And if you scroll down, it talks about how to make tabs and pills and different kinds of justifications and buttons and so on, and drop downs and everything else that you want. And if I scroll down here enough, it talks about different methods. Maybe there's some place that talks about, maybe not, that talks about how to make a nav bar that's sticky. So let's see if I go down here. And here's a couple Bootstrap that's the brand. Here's my nav, forms for navs, and text. Color schemes, you can change the color schemes here. So nav bar dark, background dark was what we did here. And then this is another color scheme altogether. Nav bar dark, background primary, right? And different containers it talks about here. And placement, fixed top. This is interesting. Fixed top, what happens is it always is fixed on the top. And if I have a lot of content to scroll through, then what happens is it sticks there, and then the content continues to scroll, but the nav bar doesn't move. That's kind of a cool thing. Fixed bottom. I like that. So this is the one I want. So I'm going to copy this one. And I'm going to put that in my footer, right? My footer. My footer right now doesn't have a class to it. It's just semantically correct. So it's in the footer portion of my web page. I have my class, navbar, fixed bottom, navbar light, background light. So it's a lighter navbar. And I can put whatever I want in here. Instead of fixed bottom for my class, let's just get rid of this. What I want to put is in something like, I don't know, maybe I'll use an H4 tag. And in my H4 tag, I'll say, kind of a copyright. And I want to say like 2019, right? And maybe you want to use a code for that, like and copy, right? Which actually puts a little copyright symbol in there and then puts that in there. So and copy copyright 2019 for the bottom of my footer. What does that look like? I go back out to here, then I have this. Notice it's right at the bottom. And the great thing about this is, if I was to do this, and notice that if I move this up, it moves with it. So the bottom, my footer bar is kind of a floaty footer bar that runs. And if I kind of do one of these, it's responsive. It's a pretty good, cool solution. I want to, again, talk about basics with you guys. This is basics for me, okay? This is not fancy crap. This is just what I would expect from any developer, right? You look at stuff, I'm showing it to you too, by the way. I'm not like saying, hey, go find it and come back. I'm saying, hey, look, here's the place to go. For more information, I highly recommend lynda.com. There's certain things I just can't cover because we don't have time this semester, right? But you have access as Centennial students to lynda.com for free. So I highly recommend going there, right? And they have full tutorials on Bootstrap. I think they're a great secondary resource. Some people use them as a primary resource. There's nothing wrong with them at all. Professional level videos owned by LinkedIn. LinkedIn owned by Microsoft. It's a professional shop that does really good work. I can't say enough about them from a learning and continuous learning perspective, right? So lynda.com. All right, so that's really cool. We've got that going on. And if you actually look at lynda.com for Bootstrap, there's like really cool advanced Bootstrap. They do a bunch of really cool stuff. They take you through the whole gamut of learning with Bootstrap 4, which I won't have time to do this semester. But I want you guys to make your stuff look good, okay? It's not just about the technology on the front end, on the back end. I mean, the front end is really important. No presentation, no appeal. I never want to see your website again, right? There's no user experience. I don't care about your website. I don't care about your app. I don't care about your game, right? Whatever it is. There's got to be something minimum. And this is the minimum for me. All right, cool. So that we've done that part. It looks okay. It's minimal. It's not that great, but it's something. And that's great. I want to put this up on GitHub, and I'm seeing that there's a problem. I see that there's 343 files that are here. How come? Well, it's kind of looked at every single file somehow. My gitignore file either is not working or I've done something to it, right, where it's not right. Maybe I've added an extra, space in here or something, but we can't have any spaces in my gitignore file. Node modules, as an example, has to be spelled correctly. Otherwise, what's going to happen is if I don't do this, then it's going to include everything, and I don't want that. Notice how it went down to 1. I do not want to put my node modules up. If this is wrong in my gitignore file, then when I put this up on GitHub, it's going to include everything. And that's real pain. All right, so challenge for you guys. I'm going to put this up on GitHub in a second, and I'm going to use the tool. Now, before I used this, notice, by the way, that this is running all the time. Light server when I'm using a basic web app. Guys and girls, basic web app, not node-based. Nothing that we're going to do next week. This is not going to apply to that. We're going to make our own, all right? But this little web app, this light server, is using a light version of Express and Node to kind of run in the background and update your service. A real server that's local to my machine. I'm going to stop it by pressing Control-C, right? And I'm going to clear this up. So what I'm going to do here is I want to upload this change. If you click on the GitHub link over here, you can see that I have one file that's changed, my index.html. That's the only file that's changed. If I want to, I could do things locally by using git add dot, git commit -m, changed, added Bootstrap, and blah, blah, blah. I can do that all here in my command prompt. Or I can use my Visual Studio Code tool. So here, notice that there's a little link. And I can, under changes, there's a couple places I could do. I could do file-based staging. So each one of these files I can click plus. Maybe there's 10 files, 20 files, 100 files. Or I can go next to changes and click them all by clicking this plus. There's 2 pluses here and here. This is the one I want. If I do this, this one now is staged. Notice it says stage changes, this index.html. Now I can add a message. Added Bootstrap support, right? And then this little check mark is my commit. Bam. My local commit, what have I just done? Git add dot, git commit -m, added Bootstrap support, right? And then I want to push it, the ellipses. Push. Done. So once you've set up your Git repository, you can use Visual Studio Code to put it up. I think it's a pretty cool workflow. Sometimes we have to get in there and get dirty with commands on the command line for Git and GitHub. For the most part, Visual Studio Code will handle a lot of it. Let's take a look and see what it looks like up online. So if I look up online here and I go to my repository, so I probably killed that. Let's just go back on GitHub. And you can see that I have my lesson 1B. And if I click on lesson 1B, you can see that I have 2 commits. I have my first commit, which is called initial commit, that happened about 42 minutes ago. And then I have my new commit, added Bootstrap support, that I just did, right? If I click on the code tab, it takes me back to this view. So this is I've added Bootstrap, and you can see where I've added new things. All right, so I did a push. How do I do a pull? So what if I added a README file here? You can actually add it right on the tool. If I click this add README, right, then you can see that it says, okay, I want to add this COMP308 W2019 less than 1B. And notice that it's using this little hash. This is using Markdown. It's actually called Markdown. I know, another language. That's why it's .md, right? And Markdown, what it does is you can actually see the preview of what it's going to look like. It's going to look like this, right? The single hash is like an H1 tag. The double hash is like an H2 tag, and so on. So I can kind of say something like, you know, demo project for Node.js and emerging technologies course. Okay? And that's my little README file. And if I notice on the bottom, I have an option to make a new commit, because that's what I'm doing. I'm actually adding a new file, making a new commit, saying, hey, I added a new file, right? So commit new file. And now I have 3 commits, right? See? 1, 2, 3. But I have a problem. Pull. Let's do the pull. So going back to Visual Studio Code, there's a couple ways I could do that. I could go here and pull. I could do sync, or I can just go in here and just type in git pull. And if I did that, it just pulls from the repository, right? And if I go back to my files, you can see now that I have a README file, which looks exactly like the one I did online, okay? And the great thing about Visual Studio Code is, if you notice, there's open changes, you know, a bunch of stuff that's happening. You can see that I can also do a split screen, right, from one thing to the other. So let's say, for example, I wanted to look at my app.js, right? But I wanted to do a split screen and look at it twice. And maybe it was a longer file, or maybe I want to look at both the app.js file and the HTML file. I can do that. So here's this. I can look at my index.html on one side, and I can look at the JavaScript file on the other side, if that makes any sense. Now, I don't have a lot of screen real estate because I'm projecting, but this might work really well for you if you're working on 2 things at once. Or I can just kind of not only look at one at a time. It's up to you. All right, so questions so far? Any questions? So recap, I did Bootstrap. We've done basic JavaScript. We've done a little bit of HTML5 and CSS. We talked about tools we're going to be using, Visual Studio Code. We're using Git and GitHub. We're using Node and Node Package Manager. I think that's enough for today, no? I can go on if you want, but I think it's going to pollute your mind more than anything else. Okay, challenge for the end of the day. And I know we're ending a little early today, and that's okay, right? Because we're going to have 4 hours every single Saturday together from now until the end, okay? Which is a long, long time. I want you to do 2 things. One, the first challenge, and I'm going to stop recording in a second, is I want you to pull my version of the stuff we've been working on in class, my exercise, right? Pull it down and make it work. See if you can do it, right? It's a challenge because some of you will not be able to make it work initially, all right? And the second thing is, there is a Dropbox that I've created up on eCentennial, right? And if you look there on eCentennial, there's a Dropbox called Exercise 1 GitHub link. Ooh, it's very, very exciting. I want you to go there, and I want you to submit a text document with your GitHub link for the exercise that we're doing today, all right? You have until midnight tonight. It's worth a portion of your in-class exercise mark, okay? It's probably going to be worth 1%. So I highly recommend you do it, right, today. Questions? That's it, guys. That's it for me. Do it now. I'm going to go around and check if you have any problems. And when you're done, show me and you can go. All right? That's it for me. All right. It's pretty simple stuff. Let's see how successful you're going to be.